We always thought that secrets made noise, that they came with shouting, slammed doors, endless arguments, or visible tears. For a long time, I believed that if something truly serious were happening inside our home, someone would notice. After all, we were a family that shared the same roof, the same meals, the same worries. How could something so big hide right there in front of our eyes? I was wrong. My sister's secret didn't arrive screaming. It arrived quiet. It settled into the corners of the house, into the empty spaces between conversations, into the averted glances and short answers. It grew in silence, fed by fear and by the certainty that, if revealed too soon, it would destroy everything. My sister had always been my reference point. Since we were kids, she was the one who defended me when someone tried to intimidate me. She was the one who stood up to our parents when she felt something was unfair. She always had a kind of courage I admired in silence. Maybe that's why it took me so long to accept that this same person was now completely lost. At first, the changes seemed normal. Small things. She started coming home later. She began wearing more closed-off clothes, even on hot days. Her easy smile gave way to neutral expressions, almost mechanical. Whenever someone asked if she was okay, the answer came automatically, "I'm fine." But she wasn't. Our house had always been noisy, not because of constant fights, but because of presence. The TV on, overlapping conversations, laughter at the wrong moments. Little by little, that noise was replaced by an uncomfortable silence. My sister spent hours in her room with the door closed. And she came out. She always seemed in a hurry to return to that refuge. My mother began to notice. "You've been so quiet lately, sweetheart," she said, trying to start a conversation. "I'm just tired, Mom." My father, as always, interpreted everything in a practical way. That's lack of discipline. People who are busy don't sit around thinking nonsense. I watched everything in silence. There was something in my sister's eyes that didn't match tiredness or drama. It was raw, deep fear, showing itself in the smallest details. The way she held her phone, how she startled at any noise, the way she avoided being alone in the living room with my father. The nights were when I knew something was wrong. The crying was quiet, almost imperceptible. Sometimes I thought it was my imagination. But when the silence of dawn took over the house, there was no denying it. It was real. She cried, trying not to be heard, trying not to disturb anyone, maybe trying to disappear. Several times, I got out of bed determined to go to her room. Every time I stopped halfway, I always told myself she would talk when she was ready. That pushing would only make things worse. Today I know that silence was the most expensive mistake of my life. The first real confrontation happened on a night that seemed too ordinary to be unforgettable. We were alone in the kitchen. The dim light illuminated the table, and the hum of the refrigerator was the only constant sound. My sister stirred a cup of cold coffee, repeating the motion, as if trapped in a thought with no escape. "Are you okay?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. The spoon stopped. Her body stiffened. It took a few seconds before she took a deep breath. "I'm fine, just tired." But something about that answer made my chest tighten instantly. It wasn't the words, it was the way she said them. Her voice faltered slightly. Her eyes didn't lift. In that moment, I understood this wasn't just a common problem. It was something bigger, something she was trying to carry alone. Days later, I came home earlier than usual. Her bedroom door was closed, but I could hear uneven breathing. I knocked. No answer. I opened the door slowly. She was sitting on the floor, hugging her legs, her face swollen from crying. When she saw me, she tried to wipe her face too quickly, as if she could erase what I had already seen. "What happened?" I asked quietly. She closed the door, sat on the bed, took a deep breath, cried again. Minutes passed in heavy silence, until she finally spoke. "If I tell you, do you promise you won't tell anyone?" That sentence changed everything. Promises made before the truth always come with a high price. Even so, I promised. She began by telling me about someone who had entered her life months earlier. Someone who seemed to understand her insecurities, who offered attention, listening, affection. At first, she felt seen, important. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone. But what started as care turned into control. He wanted to know where she was all the time, who she talked to, what she wore. He questioned friendships, opinions, even small decisions. When she tried to set boundaries, he said it was for her own good, that no one else cared like he did. Little by little, fear settled in. He said that if I told anyone, everything would get worse, she said, her voice breaking, that no one would believe me, that you would judge me. Every word weighed tons. Then came the sentence, I will never forget, I'm pregnant. The world stopped, my mind filled with questions, but none came out. She kept talking, desperate, as if silence itself were unbearable. No one can know. If Dad finds out, he'll throw me out. If Mom knows, she won't survive it. I felt everything at once, anger, fear, sadness, guilt, anger at the abandonment, at the manipulation, at the fear that silenced her, at myself, for not noticing sooner. And him, I asked. She lowered her head. He said it's not his problem. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, trying to understand how a secret can grow so big it suffocates someone from the inside, how fear can silence a person, even inside their own home. What I didn't know yet was that the worst part wouldn't be the revelation, it would be the reaction. After that night, nothing was the same anymore. There was no warning, no smooth transition, no clear moment of before and after. The change happened quietly, almost cruelly. We woke up every day pretending everything was normal, but something invisible had already settled among us, like a crack that starts small and slowly runs through the entire structure of a house. My sister tried to act like she always had. She woke up early, helped my mother, sat at the table for meals, but it was a fragile performance. Anyone paying close attention could see she was living on the edge. Every movement seemed calculated, as if she were afraid of making a mistake, afraid of drawing attention, afraid of existing too much. I carried a weight that wasn't mine alone. The promise I had made that afternoon echoed in my head constantly. Don't tell anyone. But how do you keep a secret that big inside a house where everyone watches each other all the time? How do you pretend everything is normal when you know that behind every smile, there is a truth ready to explode? My mother began to suspect something. She had always had a sixth sense for these things. She noticed details no one else did. The way my sister pushed food around on her plate without eating, the constant trips to the bathroom, the tiredness that never went away. You're not feeling well, are you? She asked one morning, her voice gentle. It's just nausea, my sister answered too quickly. I felt a chill run down my spine. That word lingered in the air longer than it should have. My mother frowned, but she didn't push, not yet. My father, on the other hand, started to get irritated. For him, changes in behavior were always a sign of defiance, never of pain. That girl's acting strange, he said, not lowering his voice. She doesn't talk, doesn't participate, stays locked in her room all the time. What's going on? My sister lowered her head. My mother tried to change the subject, and asked. I felt trapped between both sides. I knew the truth, but I didn't know how to free it without destroying everything. The nights got worse. The crying returned, more frequent, more intense. Sometimes I woke up and sat on my bed, listening, feeling a crushing sense of helplessness. I wanted to protect her. I wanted to take that fear away from her, but all I had were words that couldn't be spoken, until her body began to speak louder than any silence. One day she felt sick in the living room. She turned pale and had to sit down. My mother rushed over, worried. This isn't normal, she said, holding my sister's face. We're going to the doctor. My sister panicked. She looked at me desperately. I knew what that appointment could reveal. I knew time was running out. There's no need, Mom, she insisted. It'll pass, but it didn't. That night, the house felt heavy. My father was restless, pacing back and forth. My mother watched my sister in silence, like someone slowly connecting dots. She didn't want to accept. The confrontation came abruptly, cruelly, without preparation. I want to know what's going on, my father finally said, his voice hard. Enough of this act. My sister froze. Her hands began to shake. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. Speak, he insisted. Now, the silence that followed was unbearable. It felt like even the walls were waiting. She looked at me. In that look was everything. Fear, a plea for help, guilt for putting me in that position, desperation. I understood, in that instant, that the secret couldn't survive anymore. I'm pregnant, she said, almost in a whisper. It was as if time stopped. My mother covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. My father took a step back as if he had been physically struck. What? He asked, his voice unrecognizable. I'm pregnant, she repeated, now crying. The world collapsed right there. My father started shouting. He talked about shame, about disappointment, about everything he believed he had failed at. My mother cried, trying to understand. My sister just trembled, shrinking into herself like a terrified child. Who is the father of this child? My father demanded, furious. She didn't answer. That was when I realized I couldn't stay silent anymore. Every second of silence was another blow to her. She was manipulated. I said, my voice steady despite the fear, threatened, abandoned. My father looked at me as if I had betrayed something sacred. You knew? He asked. I nodded. That was the breaking point. He stormed out of the house, slamming the door, shouting things none of us were prepared to hear. The house fell into absolute silence, a silence full of shattered pieces. My mother broke down crying. My sister sat on the floor, hugging her belly, repeating that she was sorry. The days that followed were the longest of my life. My father didn't come back. He didn't call. He didn't send messages. His absence took up more space than his presence ever had. My mother tried to stay strong, but cried in secret. My sister blamed herself for everything, for the tension, for the pain, for the rupture. I destroyed our family, she said, and that hurt more than any scream. But the truth was that the family had been cracked long before. The secret only revealed the fractures. With time, my father returned, first in silence, then with long looks, then with questions, hard, uncomfortable, but necessary questions. He began to understand, not everything, not all at once, but enough to realize he had almost lost his daughter, not to a bad choice, but to fear. One afternoon, he sat beside her. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain himself. He simply placed his hand over hers. It was the most important gesture I had ever seen. The pregnancy moved forward. The atmosphere was still tense, but something new hung in the air. A quiet care, a shy attempt at rebuilding. And when my niece was born, healthy, crying loudly, something changed forever. But the story wasn't over yet, because sometimes the greatest impact of a secret isn't in its revelation, it's in what comes after. After my niece was born, the house changed in a way I could never fully explain to anyone from the outside. It wasn't a simple change, and it wasn't immediate. It wasn't as if everyone woke up one day better, more understanding, more united. On the contrary, the change came mixed with silence, with looks that lasted too long, with conversations that stopped halfway through a sentence. The child arrived bringing life, but also bringing to the surface everything that had been pushed under the rug for years. My sister spent most of the first days in a state of emotional exhaustion. She loved her daughter with an intensity that was almost frightening, as if that small being were proof that everything had somehow been worth it. At the same time, she carried a deep sense of guilt for having hidden the truth, guilt for having been afraid, guilt for having put all of us in that situation. My mother transformed. She became quieter, more observant. She spent hours watching her granddaughter sleep, as if trying to understand at what point life had slipped out of her control. Sometimes she cried softly, not out of pure sadness, but out of grief. Grief for the daughter who suffered in silence. Grief for the illusion that she had always been in control of everything. My father was the one who changed the most. In the first days after the birth, he kept his distance. He watched from afar, in silence, as if he were afraid that getting too close would break something fragile. But little by little, he began to approach, first with simple questions, then with small gestures. A glass of water left beside the bed, a question about whether the baby had slept, a quick touch on the child's head. I could see the conflict inside him. He had been raised to believe that authority came before affection, that showing emotion was a sign of weakness. And now he was there, facing a daughter he had almost lost, and a granddaughter who existed despite everything, trying to relearn how to love without causing harm. There was one night that marked everything for me. My sister was sitting in the living room, breastfeeding. When my father slowly approached, he stood there in silence for a few seconds. Then he said, without looking directly at her, "I failed you." The sentence fell heavy into the room. My sister began to cry immediately. It wasn't a cry of anger. It was a cry of relief, as if that simple admission opened a door that had been locked for years. "I was afraid, Dad," she replied. "I thought you would never forgive me." He took a deep breath. "I was afraid too," he confessed. Afraid of losing control, afraid of not knowing what to do. In that moment I understood something I had never realized before. The silence in that house had not been caused only by my sister's secret. It came from generations, from a family that never learned how to talk about feeling, that always believed love was shown through rules, not through listening. Time passed. There was no perfect happy ending. There were good days and bad days, arguments that resurfaced, memories that hurt, wounds that healed slowly, but there was something new, dialogue. Even when it was difficult, even when it was uncomfortable, my sister began therapy, at first, reluctantly, then, out of necessity, she learned to name what she felt, to understand that the fear that silenced her was not weakness, but survival. She learned that asking for help did not make her smaller. I changed too. Carrying that secret with me transformed me. I learned in the hardest way possible that staying silent is not always the same as respecting someone's time. Sometimes, it is abandonment. Sometimes, it is self-protection at the expense of someone who is suffering. There were many nights when I thought about that moment when I stopped with my hand raised in front of her bedroom door. I thought about how everything might have been different if I had not. Maybe I wouldn't have prevented the pain, but maybe I would have lessened the weight she carried alone. Today, when I watch my niece running through the house, laughing loudly, filling every space with life, I understand that this child is not the result of a mistake. She is the result of a difficult story. Yes, but also of resilience, of survival, of love that found a way to exist even in the middle of chaos. Our family never went back to what it was before, and maybe that's a good thing, because the before was full of dangerous silences, swallowed emotions, unspoken truths. The after is imperfect, but real. It is made of difficult conversations, late apologies, and honest attempts to do better. If there is one thing this story taught me, it is that secrets do not disappear when they are ignored. They grow, they take root, they seep into everything, and when they finally come to light, they do not ask for permission. But I also learned that truth, as painful as it may be, creates space for something new, for rebuilding, for change, for a love that is less rigid and more human. My sister kept a secret that changed our family, changed it forever. And despite the pain, maybe it changed in the way it needed to change.